Hello, welcome to the Church360 Ledger Basic Principles and Chart of Accounts webinar. Hi, my name is Rod Kiles, and I am the Customer Onboarding Specialist for Concordia Technology Solutions. I've been with the company a little bit over 17 years now, and I really appreciate the opportunity to serve churches. You can reach me one of two ways. You can reach me, of course, by email at rod.kiles@cph.org, and you can reach me by phone at 314-268-1315. I kindly ask that you mute your phones and or microphones and post any questions you may have in the question window. Joining me today to answer those questions is going to be Jordan Bogart. He's one of our software support technicians. He's been here numerous years as well, and he can answer any questions that come through. And you may have actually spoken to him in the past. So you can reach him either through the support line at 1-800-346-6120. And of course, you can email him at jordan.bogart@cph.org. So when it comes to these webinars, they are broken into little sections, and we'll talk about those items first. So we have like a class agenda, basically laying out the order of our webinar. So class agenda, we're going to start out with going through our class overview, explaining the topics that we're going to cover. Then we're going to have a discussion, and the discussion, usually the first part of the discussion, usually lasts about 45 minutes. This is a first run for this structure of the webinar. We have planned 90 minutes for this training webinar, and it'll probably be pretty close to 90 minutes. But with it being a first run, we'll just kind of see how it goes. But if you have to drop off at any point in time, feel free to do so. My associate, Buffy Alvarez, she'll be sending out the link to the training webinar at the end of the session. So, well, not exactly the end of the session, but once it's uploaded, then we'll send it out. So it may be tomorrow before that actually goes out. And we also upload them to YouTube as well. So we'll have our discussion. Then from there, we'll have our short 5-minute intermission. That's yours to do with whatever you want during that time period. Then we'll have our second half of the discussion where we'll wrap up the rest of the topics that are left to be covered. Then we'll have our short quiz. No pressure on the quiz. It's just to tie up loose ends and reiterate a few topics. After the quiz, then we'll have our question and answer session. So let's go ahead and go through our overview. We're going to start out by going through some basic principles, just some concepts that we need to know when working with Church360 Ledger, working with this type of accounting. Then we're going to go into what I'm going to call getting started. So we're going to log into the system. We're also going to go through site navigation. We're going to go through importing the database. And actually, I want to reverse that. We're going to talk about importing the database first, then we're going to do a login, and then we're going to do site navigation. So it's a little tricky. It's not your normal procedure once you get your data and things set up. In those situations, we'll just be logging in. So the workflow is a little reversed because we're going to show you from the beginning on how to use the software. So after we go through importing, then we're going to go through setup. I'm calling them administrative settings. So there's some settings that only the administrator is going to work with. So we're going to go through those settings, and we're going to discuss books in further detail. We're going to go through fiscal years and make sure that that information is set up correctly. Then from there, we're going to jump into our chart of accounts. And I have several slides to show on the chart of accounts to discuss each one of the account types so that we become more familiar with those. Then we'll also talk about restricted funds for customers who are converting from Shepherd staff. Restricted funds is a conversation that they want to have. So we'll discuss restricted funds. We'll also talk about budgets, and we'll talk about payees. Then when we get done talking about payees, we'll have our short quiz, and we'll have our question and answer session. And when that's done, I guess we'll head to lunch or head out for the day, whatever we have left to take care of. Okay, so it's time for us to get started. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the webcam so we can focus in on the material. And we're going to start here by talking about our basic accounting principles. So with the basic accounting principles, there's some things that are just similar, or some things that are need to know items for using Church360 Ledger. And For those people who have been doing accounting for a while, these are things you're already aware of. For those people who are newer to doing this, you may not be an accountant. These things are just kind of nice to know because they give you a better understanding of the software and what to expect inside of the software. So we're going to start out with accounting principles, and one of the first things to know about Church360 Ledger is it is fund accounting. And I guess you say number one, each book inside of Church360 Ledger is going to be a separate accounting entity with its own assets, liabilities, income, and expense accounts. So these accounts are going to be used to track funding, giving to the church. Asset accounts are going to track the money in your bank accounts. Liabilities will track money owed. Income will track money coming into the church, and expense will track money going out of the church. And there's some more nuances to accounts than that, but they do track the money that's coming into the church and keep a hold of those balances. So, and then the third item, any money transferred between books should be considered a loan that is to be paid back unless it's a gift. So since each book is separate, if you're transferring money between those books, then it's going to show on like your statement of income and expense, and you may want to reverse that so your statement of income and expense is not incorrect or has a bad balance there. So, okay, fund accounting. To continue with accounting principles, Church360 Ledger works on a cash basis. It uses cash accounting. It is not accrual accounting, it's cash accounting. And one of the major principles for that is income is recorded and recognized when it is received. So as soon as those offerings come in, you're going to create a deposit, or I guess your offering counters are going to count that money. Then somebody's going to take it to the bank, create a deposit. When that happens, a deposit is entered into the system, basically recording your income, and it's going to be recognized on your report. So income is recorded and recognized when it is received. Expenses are recorded and recognized when the money is spent. So if you write a check, make a payment on a debit or debit card, then you're going to want to enter that into the system. And that's going to make sure that all our balances are correct. So as soon as it happens, we're going to enter that information into the program. Some of the benefits of cash accounting is that it's easier to track the money that's coming in and going out of the system. If you're always putting that information into the system, when it comes time to explain it, it's going to be easier to explain this to your congregation and church council where everything stands. So basically, staying on top of it and recording it whenever it takes place is going to keep everything clear for everybody when it comes to the balances and how the money's being spent and how the money's coming into the church. The third one is it's safer since you won't run into cash flow problems when several accounts come due at one point in time. They come due at once. So with accrual accounting, you can have other numbers on the books that represent expenditures that will take place in the future or money that's going to come into the future. And at times those things don't happen and it makes the numbers look a little weird. It's more like you're planning on this happening than it actually representing what has happened. And cash accounting is representing what's taken place. So that's the benefits of cash accounting. So when you're working with Church360 Ledger, it does work on a finance year, or you could say fiscal year. And these years consist of 12 consecutive months. So you have the option of calendar or non-calendar. The majority of the churches that I talk to work on a calendar basis, but there's lots of churches out there that use a non-calendar fiscal year. So when you're working with your calendar year, you're going to say this is January 1st through December 31st. And if it's a non-calendar year, you'd say an example of a non-calendar year would be like August 1st through July 31st. And you would say one of the benefits of using a non-calendar year is that you don't have a year end that takes place right after Christmas and during the first of the year where people are out of the office and stuff like that. So you can have a year end at a less busy time. So options, either calendar or non-calendar. And whenever you're working with a fiscal year, it is referred to by the end date of the end year. So like right now, if it's a calendar year, you're saying fiscal year 2018. If it's a non-calendar year, you're saying fiscal year 2019. So it's that end year of the last date for that fiscal or finance year. Okay, another principle when it comes to how we're going to deal with our accounts and our transactions inside of Church360 Ledger is that this is double entry bookkeeping. And the basic principle of this standard accounting system is that there will always be at least 2 accounts on every transaction, and that the debits and credits on a transaction must balance. And I have a good example here. For example, when a deposit is made, money goes not only into an asset checking account, but it also goes to an offset tracking account that shows where that money was from. And if it's like a check, you'd say what that money was spent for. So it's double entry bookkeeping when we're talking about the transactions. You can have more than one line item, or you'll be required to have more than one line item. You'll have 2 line items or more, so there could be 10 line items. But no matter how many line items you have on there, you'll have the debits and credits will have to match. And we'll be talking more about debits and credits in tomorrow's transactions, reconciliation, and reports training. But we kind of want to, plant that seed right now so that when you're dealing with these transactions, there's going to at least be 2 line items, and these credits and debits are going to match. In most cases, the software is going to make that real simple for you. You're going to put certain accounts on the left and certain accounts on the right when you're creating these transactions. The journal entries are going to be ones where you're literally creating the line items and stating the credits and debits, and those can be a little more complicated. But we'll show you how to do that and how to make sure you get those transactions right in our next training. Okay, so accounting principles, double entry bookkeeping. Account types is my next slide. So now that we've got some of those principles out of the way, things that we kind of need to know to get started, let's switch over to Church360 Ledger. And I'm going to take you from basically the starting screen when you first log into the software all the way through setting everything up. So in looking at this, it's going to say email address. Basically, when you purchase a software, someone's going to receive an email and they're going to need to set the system up. And in situations like this, it's really in most cases going to be the system administrator who's going to set this up, or your treasurer who's going to set this up. And I'm going to type in my email address, rod.kiles@cph.org. And I'm going to type in my password, and it's going to ask me to confirm my password. So at that point, I will click sign up, and it's going to take me into the next screen where I'm going to verify my church details. Now, it's offering me a chance to save my password, and I'm going to say no to saving my password. If I save my password, then somebody can log into the system when I'm not there. So you just want to be careful with that. If you're on a machine and it's like your machine and no one else can access it, you may want to consider that, but you just want to be careful because auto login does mean that you don't have to know the username and password to log in. It'll autofill that information for you. So from there, it'll find our church details. That's pulled from our system here. So the Christ Community Church, and it's 314-268-1315. Then church address, all that information looks correct, so I'll click submit. Then that takes me to the next window where I have 2 panels here. So there's create your first book, and then there's also import your Shepherd Staff Finance database. This is basically a Y in the road. So either you'll create your first book or you'll import your data from Shepherd Staff. If you're creating your first book, you'll just name your book, select the starting month or fiscal year for your fiscal year, and then you'll select your start date for your book. So lots of times I'll see where people just say your book name here, but you probably want to type in the name of the church instead of just saying your book name here, or instead of calling it the general fund. So unless it really is you're having multiple books and this one's called the general fund. So in most cases, people just type their church name there. Then they'll select the start month for their fiscal year. So January or March or whatever the start month is. And then they'll select the start date. And the start date will be the oldest date that you can enter a transaction into the system, but it'll also be the date for your initial balances in the system as well. So if you're starting on January 1, then you're going to want to say January 1. Then you'll go into the system and you'll create accounts and you'll give those accounts initial balances, starting balances. And then basically as you apply transactions to those accounts, then the balances will change. So just to note, this is the date for your initial balances and for your for the oldest date that you can enter a transaction into the system. So if I set this to 1/1/2018, I won't be able to enter a transaction for 12/31/2017. So dual purpose there. So if you're not importing from Shepherd Staff, you'll fill in this information and click submit. For those people who are converting from Shepherd Staff, I'm going to show this process here. And when dealing with converting from Shepherd Staff, you'll need to browse to your database. And for most people, I'm going to click choose file here. They are going to go to their C drive and go into the Shepherd Staff database folder and go to their database. So it could be stored on a server. If you are basically the primary computer, then it could be stored on your machine. So I'm going to open up our demo database that has all of our sample or dummy data in there. So I've selected the demo database. Of course, you can give us a call and we can help you find the database if you need help with that. From there, you can say import everything from Shepherd Staff, and you can also say import your chart of accounts with current balances only. Now, I'm going to open up Shepherd Staff here just for a second to show two things real quick. So this is my Shepherd Staff software. And if you don't know where your database is, you can go to Utilities, you can go to Settings, and you can go to the Locations tab. And then there's a spot that shows where your database is located. So it's not always located directly on the C drive inside the Shepherd Staff folder. So it could be in different places. So cancel that and just minimize that. Now, when you're importing data from Shepherd Staff, it says import everything from Shepherd Staff Finance Database, includes chart of accounts, balances, and transactions. Then there's an option that says import chart of accounts with current balances only. So if you're deciding to start over, for the most part, you can say that you want to import with current balances only. The second scenario is if your church uses dedicated accounts inside of the finance module in Shepherd Staff, then in situations like that, you'll only have the option to import your chart of accounts with the balances, because dedicated accounts do not exist inside of Church360 Ledger. They're using something that's called restricted funds, and we'll be talking more about restricted funds. But the database that we have doesn't have dedicated accounts, so I'm going to be able to import everything. I'm going to go ahead and click submit here to start that uploading process so that we can import our Shepherd Staff database. And it'll just take a few moments for that to go through the process. And basically, it's going to upload the database and it's going to start converting this information. So it's going to take the finance funds inside of the finance module and convert that into books. It's going to take the major groups and minor groups and convert that into categories. It's going to take accounts and leave those as accounts, so they'll be inside of our major groups and minor groups, so they'll be inside of these categories. Then there's going to be the restricted funds. Since it didn't find any restricted funds, it's going to allow me to import the transactions. But if it did find the restricted, since it didn't find dedicated accounts, it's going to allow me to import the transactions. But if it would have found dedicated accounts, it would give me an option to convert the dedicated accounts to restricted funds. And that might be something that I'll present in my next edition of this training. So we'll host this again in so many months down the line. But if somebody has a question about how that actual process goes through, give me a call. You can call me at 314-268-1315, or you can give us a call to the support line, and we can actually walk you through converting those restricted funds. So whatever budgets it finds inside of the budget table, it will convert those budgets. So you can see like there's 3,240 budgets. That's not just for 2018, but that's also 2017, 2016, 2015, going back into the past so that you can see your budget history. And then it takes your vendors and it converts those vendors into payees. So payees is kind of like a combination of people that you're going to pay in your employees and your vendors. So they kind of came up with the word payees. It combines it all together. So and it goes through those top ones pretty quick, and it takes the transactions a little bit longer. So it'll work through each one of your years of transactions and import those into the system. So I did mention that if you have dedicated accounts, it won't allow you to import your transactions. Let me add one other thing. If your system has equity accounts, it won't allow you to insert the transactions as well. So this system just works with assets, liabilities, income, and expense accounts. So the dedicated accounts and the equity accounts will stop the transactions from importing. But it basically tracks the equity in the background of the system, but it doesn't have where users can adjust the equity manually on their own. So once we're done, we'll go to load your ledger, and then that will take us into this window. So we can see our transactions down here. We're going to land here on our main Church360 ledger screen. And since our fund inside of the Shepherd Staff Finance module was called General, it's showing General here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out, and then I'm going to log back in. So we've imported the data. I've logged out. When you normally come to Church360 Ledger, your screen's going to look just like this. So what we saw just a few minutes ago was us coming to the system for the first time and setting it up. Then from here, I can go in and rod.kyles, cph.org, and I can type in my password. If I forget my password, I can use the forgot your password link. That allows me to go to the next page, type in the email address, and send a request to reset my password. So with this, everything is manually. Everything is self-administered, not manually, but self-administered. So if you create your own password, you're the only one who knows it. The administrator doesn't know your password. The financial secretary doesn't know the password. You're the only one who knows it. If you forget it, you just reset the password and create a new one. So let me go back. Click my back arrow. There we go. So I could have clicked sign in as well. And then if I didn't receive the unlock instructions, I can click that link. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. And then that's going to take me back into the system. I'm going to land here on our home screen. And across the top of the window is going to be our main menu bar. So there's going to be an orange $sign. There's going to be our book selector. So ours is called General. We're going to rename that here in just a moment. But your book is going to be your accounting entity. So it's going to be a collection of all of your assets, liabilities, income, and expense accounts that are inside of this book, that are inside of the church, basically. So you would have a separate book. In most cases, you would only have one book, but you would have a separate book in a case where you had a church and a school, or you had a church and a daycare. It could also be a thrift shop or a cemetery, but basically it's a separate entity. It's something, almost like a separate business where they've got money that doesn't mingle. So if you just have one checking account, you're probably only going to only have one book. If you have multiple checking accounts In most cases, you're going to put all those into one book so that you can report on that information and compare that information. But there is the possibility, if you want something completely separate, to create a separate book. That's really up to the church to decide on how they want to see that information. Putting it in a separate book does mean that all that information is going to show on separate reports. They're not going to be combined together. Okay, so that's our book selector. To the right of that's going to be our print queue. Anytime that we create a check, it's going to go into the print queue. To the right of that, there's going to be pending transactions. And what are pending transactions? Pending transactions are two things. Pending transactions are going to be offering batches that are being passed over from Church360 members to create deposits in Church360 Ledger. So like we have 400 of these little offering batches inside of the system. So if you have Church360 Ledger, it will look to Church360 members to see if there was any offering batches that haven't been passed over. And since I'm starting out new, it sees that there's 400 of those. So, and we'll talk more about these tomorrow when we get together. But the second type of item is that you'll see under pending transaction is going to be your recurrent transaction. So you can enter a check into the system for a payee that will generate every 2 weeks, and it will show underneath your pending transactions as well. To the right of our pending transactions icon is going to be our reports icon. It has 4 major reports here. Then there's also an event log. To the right of that is going to be our settings gear. And the settings gear is going to be broken into 2 little sections. And we're going to go through most of these items today, a majority of them, and then we'll go through the other ones tomorrow. And then to the right of that will be your profile icon, and that allows you to log out of the system. Church360 Ledger does keep you logged in for 2 hours, and basically as long as you're making changes, it'll keep you logged in, but if it sits idle for 2 hours, it'll log you out. And of course, you can log out at any time. So if you're in an area where somebody might access your computer, you may just simply want to log out for safety purposes. Now, above that's going to be user settings. User settings is where you can change your email address and change your password. So let's go in here and let's take a look at our general site settings. So I'm going to go to the gear here at the top and go to general. And underneath general, we're going to have our church name. We're going to want to make sure the church name and address is correct because that information is going to print on checks. We'll have our customer number. When speaking of checks, there is 2 styles of checks. There's top checks and middle checks. And our checks are supplied by a company called Forms Plus Inc. So with formsplusinc.com, on here, if you go to checks, and scroll down just a little bit, it'll show your Church360 middle and Church360 top laser checks. So, you know, you can use a different company. We work with Forms Plus, and those checks work with our software. If you have checks from another program and the format is close enough, you can use those checks. But with this, we've tested these, and these do work, and you can contact them and get a quote if you'd like to. So, okay, so, oh, I didn't read the website name. So it's formsplusinc.com. So you can go to formsplusinc.com if you wanted to look into purchasing checks. Okay, so it could be top or middle checks. When it comes to your signature, if you use 2 signature checks, then you can check that box. Then you can also make sure the phone number is correct. So, okay, so I'm going to save that. And oh, let me mention one other thing about checks. If you're converting from Shepherd Staff and you're using the middle checks, then those checks will work with Church360 Ledger as well. Okay, so we'll just say save that and uncheck the 2 signature checks and save that. So, okay, so once we've reviewed our general settings, the next thing to take a look at is our roles and login. So we've gotten into the software and we want to invite a couple people to access the software. So we'll go to the gear and we'll go to roles, And roles is going to be a collection of rights or a collection of permissions within the system. And it automatically comes with an administrator role. And that administrator role is going to give you rights to everything inside of the software. If you want to create a secondary role or another role to allow people to access the software without having access to everything, you can say add a new one here inside of the, you can click that here inside of the roles view and you could name that role. So like you have a treasurer, but say the financial secretary is going to be your backup to help double check balances and stuff like that. Or it's a ministry leader and that person just has rights to view certain accounts. You can create a couple different roles there that allows the appropriate people to view the software, but probably not make a whole lot of changes or any changes at all. So financial secretary, say that they can log in and access our general fund here. And we're going to rename that here in just a moment. They cannot manage your chart of accounts, so they can't add accounts in or anything like that. They can't create transactions, so they won't be able to manage recurrent transactions, create deposits, payments, transfers, checks, journal entries, or edit transactions or print transactions. So we would leave all those unchecked for a financial secretary. But you can say that, hey, they can view certain accounts or they can view all accounts, just depending on, how you want to set this up. So let's say they can view some accounts. And if that's the case, you can say can view, then click submit. Then you go back into the role and you can at that point click selected accounts and it'll take you to a window where you can select your book and then you can go through and check the accounts that you want them to be able to view. So it could be, all of them, or it could be some of them. With the financial secretary, maybe they don't see the liabilities, but they can see the checking accounts. And then if you go down to the incomes, they can see all of the income information since they're going to be keeping track of offerings inside of the Church360 member software. So, and then we'll leave expenses off. So kind of focus in on these items here. So then at that point, you could close this window and then click submit. And then that will create that role. And you can create as many roles as you would like. Once you've created the role to invite somebody to actually use the software, you can go to the gear and go to users. And then you can say add a new one and select the user that you want to invite. So I'm going to invite Jordan. And then select Jordan's role. And any of the roles that I've created, he will be able to, or any of the roles that I've created, I'll be able to assign to him. When he logs in, he'll only be able to do the things that are related to that role. So click submit, and then that shoots an invite. So it shoots a notification email over to Jordan. And then Jordan will be able to log in and access the things that I said that he could access. Okay, so from here, we now have invited people to access the software. Next, we're going to go to the gear and we're going to take a look at our books first. So we're going to go here on the gear and we're going to go down to books. And books are basically going to be our church or our school. It's going to be the divide that we have there between the, I guess, the finances within our organization there. So like if I go to general, and I don't particularly like to just call it a fun name. I like to either call it a church or a school or a daycare or a thrift shop or something along those lines. So we're going to do Christ Community Church here. And since we imported the data, it knows the fiscal years that were inside of the old program. So it automatically fills in that date. So this is the start date for our first book inside of the program. So I'm going to go ahead and submit that. Let me mention something else, a couple of things I said earlier, like, hey, whatever this start date is, that's the date of, that's the oldest date you can enter in a transaction into the system. Another thing about this date is this date can be changed up until the point that you do your first bank account reconciliation. So if we enter this in here and we decided, oh, wait a second, we really want to go back and enter all the transactions for last year so that we'll have a little bit more history, we'll have additional history inside the program. You could go in here and change this date to a prior year. So if we could say January 1, 2011. So you can go back and change it, but that can only be done up to the point that you create your first bank account reconciliation. So once you've done that first bank account reconciliation, I'm going to close this out. Once you've done that first bank account reconciliation, then it locks this date and it can no longer be changed. It also locks your initial balances as well. So it's kind of like I guess a line of demarcation. It's a line that's drawn that you can't go back over. So once you reconcile that, that locks all of those things. So kind of like a safety measure there. Okay, so from there, once we have our books in the system, I'm going to refresh my screen and Christ Community Church. Then from there, we're going to take a look at our fiscal years, our finance years here. So all of those, all of that history and all those fiscal and finance years would have imported in from Shepherd staff, and it's going to show here on this screen. So we basically started the new edition of our demo database back in January of 2012, and we've been updating that information ever since. So then from this point, you'll notice that there's a little lock here on the right-hand side, and you'll notice that the lock is red, and you'll notice that the lock is locked. Okay, so there are questions about, hey, does this mean that this book or that this year is locked? And that is not the case. So when you're working with these locks, let me click one more time. The gray lock on the screen, that represents the fiscal year being locked. The buttons that have, I guess, a splash of color on them, those represent the action to be applied to the book. So if I click a red lock, it's the action to be applied to the year. Restate that, the action to be applied to the year. So the ones with a splash of color represent the action to be applied to the year. So if it's a red lock, that means I'm going to lock that year. If it is a green lock, that means I'm going to unlock that year. So green is unlocking the year, red is locking the year, and gray is representing the status that that book is currently locked. So I'm going to say that one more time because there's lots of times there's a little bit of confusion there. If it's showing a red lock, that means that I can lock that book. If it's showing a green lock, that means I can third time's the charm here. If it's a red lock, that means I can lock that year. If it's a green lock, that means I can unlock that year. And if it's a gray lock, it means that that year is locked. Okay, so 3 options there. The ones with color are going to be action buttons that allow you to make changes. When it comes time to closing out your finance or fiscal years, what you'll do is you'll just lock the years until you get all the way to the end. That's basically the way the year end works in Church360 Ledger. There's not a utility to run. There's no additional or other items. You're just going to go through here, and basically once you've locked that year, then you can kind of go on with your normal task at that point in time. So 2018 is open. I can unlock 2017, 2016, 15, 14, 13, and 12 are all locked. Okay, so let's go back up here to the top. Now it's going to say current fiscal year. That's just letting us know that this is the current fiscal year. If we decide to go from a calendar year to a non-calendar year or vice versa, then you can go in here, you can select the month that you're going to start your new fiscal or finance year, and then click the save button, and then that will change the upcoming start month for your fiscal year. So the only time you use this is if you're changing your fiscal year. Anytime you're locking, you'll just go down here and use the locks to lock or unlock the books to lock or unlock the years that you're dealing with. Okay, so that's fiscal years. And let's go ahead. It is 10:45 on the dot. So let's go ahead and let's take our 5-minute intermission. And when we reconvene, we are going to go through account types. So, okay, just 1 second. Let me pull up my timer. There we go. And I hope everybody has a wonderful intermission. And when we reconvene, we'll jump back into accounts. Thanks, everyone. Hello, everyone. Hope you had a wonderful intermission there. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to, not Shepherd Staff, but switch back to Church360 Ledger here. And the next thing we're going to talk about is going to be account types. And basically, we're going to add some items to the chart of accounts that we imported from Shepherd Staff. And we're going to show things like dragging and dropping, categorizing, how to create restricted funds and things like that. So to access your chart of accounts, you'll go to the gear here at the upper right, and you'll click on chart of accounts. And then that will take you to your chart of accounts view. You do not want to confuse the chart of accounts view with the chart of accounts report. The chart of accounts report is a reporting mechanism. The chart of accounts view is going to be used for organizing and managing your chart of accounts. So a little bit different. So let's switch back to our PowerPoint presentation here. And we are going to go to our account type slide. There we go. Okay, and the first account type that we want to talk about is going to be assets. And I just basically say, hey, assets are going to be what the congregation owns. There's going to be two types of assets. So there's current assets, monetary, and then there's fixed assets, which are non-monetary. So basically, there's two types of assets. And when we're talking about our current assets, this is going to be money in checking and savings accounts. It could also be certificates of deposit, so CDs that you have, and it could be stocks as well, I guess mutual funds, those types of things. So every time I think about current assets, I always say to myself, these are things that are cash or could be quickly converted to cash. So those are going to be your current assets. When it comes to fixed assets, these are going to be buildings, land, and it could be equipment as well. So just depending on how in depth you want to go with your assets, you will enter in current, every church enters in current assets, only some churches enter in fixed assets. So let's go ahead and let's go back to Church360 Ledger here, and let's add in an additional account. So we have quite a few accounts that imported in from Shepherd Staff. To create a new account, you'll use the new account button down here at the bottom. And say that we are going to create a youth checking account. And this here is just to keep track of the money that is going to be used for the upcoming youth trip. So youth checking, then we can enter in an account number. The account numbers are not required. So with Shepherd Staff, you did have to have account numbers, and with lots of other systems, you have to have account numbers. But with Church360 Ledger, they made that optional. So if you want to use account numbers, you definitely can. This would not be the account number that is with the bank, but it would be the account number inside of your own numbering system. So like when you look here and you see the 011-01-01-01-01, that's the numbering system that came over from Shepherd Staff. But with this, you could have your own numbering system, and you could say, hey, I just want to do 1010101, or I could do 10,001 or something along those lines. So you could create your own numbering system where the account numbers aren't as long, and then the second account could be 10,002. Or that's 100,002, then 100,003, and you can create your own system and build out from there. In most cases, assets are going to be ones, liabilities are going to be twos, then the incomes typically are either going to be fours or fives, and then the expenses are either going to be fives and sixes. So just depending on how you plan that out. So I've noticed a lot of churches, when given the option to not use account numbers, they tend to go with not going with account numbers, basically letting the name be the representation. But if you like the account numbers, feel free to add them in. When you're working with the account numbers typically don't show throughout the software. There's areas that the account numbers do show, and they try to do it in a strategic way. If you want the account number to show everywhere throughout the software, then you can put the account number in with the account name. So let's say that I'm going to put this checking account at Central Trust Checking, and I'm going to use a number similar to the number that is there, so 010102. Then at that point, I can state whether or not we can write checks from this account, and I can enter in an initial balance. So we'll say $500, and then click submit. And at that point, the name is inside of the account. I'm sorry, the number is inside of the name. Then I'm going to click Save Changes and confirm our changes. And you're going to want to save and confirm changes periodically. And that will allow you to have that information saved. Like, it's not really saved, it's just stored in the web browser until you click Save Changes and you confirm your changes. So you just want to save periodically. Usually I'll go through and I'll change several different accounts, and then I'll save and confirm my changes. So worst case scenario, if the computer crashes or we have an outage, an electricity outage, then I've only lost a few accounts because I've saved them. So you'll notice the 8 little dots here on the left-hand side. You can grab those and you can drag and drop to position your accounts in your categories here within your chart of accounts. So you'll notice the little red arrow there. That red arrow is going to kind of be your pointer and help guide you to where you want that account to be. So when you're dragging and dropping something, you'll keep an eye on that red triangle. And you may have to pull the item over several inches to the right to get it to drop into the right place. But once you have it in the right place, you can click Save and you can confirm your changes, and it will confirm your changes. Now, when you're looking inside this view, you'll notice that some of the items have a vertical teal bar here and some of the items don't. The ones without a vertical teal bar, those are going to be our accounts, and basically accounts are going to track money. The categories, which are going to have the vertical teal bar, those are going to be used for grouping accounts together. And then, like, we have $181,853.42 plus 500 equals our $182,353.42. So we're up over 182,000 at that point in time. So categories group accounts together. The order of the items that you see inside of the chart of accounts is the order that these items will be throughout the program. So when you're looking at your reports, what you're seeing here is what you're going to see on your reports. When you're entering in transactions and you're scrolling through the drop list, the order here is going to be the order inside of that drop list. And when you're drilling down into an account through the home screen, this is going to be the path that you drill down into that account through. So, the order that you set up here is very important, and you can basically drag and drop to reposition those items. So, and I won't create another category inside of the assets part, but I'll create one when we get into liabilities or income accounts. So you will notice that there is a restricted fund button here, and restricted funds allow you to track money that's been given for a specific purpose. And let me switch over to that slide. And so we talked about assets. The second, and this one really isn't an account type, but it's within your assets and it's notable, so we kind of need to talk about this. So restricted funds is going to be money reserved for a specific purpose. Building fund, could be flower fund, memorial fund, anytime someone gives to the church and basically says, hey, I want it used for this purpose, then you can track that with a restricted fund. So money reserved for a specific purpose. These are not budgeted accounts. You cannot assign budgets to restricted funds. The balances do carry over to a new year. So if you have a building fund and it runs over 3 years, then as you're receiving that money, you could store it in the restricted fund. Then come January of 2019, that money isn't zeroed out. If you use an income account, and we're going to talk about income accounts here in just a second, those accounts do zero out at the end of the year. So the balances are basically lost at that point. So if it's money reserved for a specific purpose, a specific reason, then please use restricted funds. These balances are held in an asset account, and we're going to show that here in just a couple seconds, but restricted funds inside of Church360 Ledger are part of the assets. Okay, so liabilities are next. So we'll go back to Church360 Ledger, and we're going to add in a restricted fund and say that with our setup, we are going to say that all of our restricted money is going to be stored here in savings. So some churches do that. So I'm going to say new restricted fund, and we're going to go in here and let's say that we have a building fund. So building fund, then you can click submit, and 2 things are going to happen. Well, and really more like 3 things, but 2 things majorly. It's going to create this unrestricted account here, and it's going to take all the money from our checking account and denote it as unrestricted. So the 3rd thing is, of course, is going to create the building fund. But it creating this unrestricted fund and assigning all that money there is notable. So in looking at this, you'll notice how the building fund, when we created it, it did not have a balance option. Basically, you're creating the restriction, and then you'll need to transfer money from unrestricted into the restriction. So you'll, when you're setting this up, you're going to go through, and I'm going to add memorial now. Memorials, submit. You'll go through and you'll create each one of these restrictions, just creating the list, but then you'll do a transfer transaction to go through and flower fund, to go through and assign that money. So whatever part of the building fund is restricted, then you'll take that out of our 61,000 here and transfer it down to the building fund. And you'll do the same for memorials and our flower fund. So you'll just kind of rinse and repeat. You can create one big transaction, or you can create multiple transactions, all depending on how you want to handle it. Most people create one big transaction. They'll create all of their accounts, and then they'll go into and have unrestricted on one side of the transaction and then have the restricted funds on the other side. And we'll show that tomorrow when we actually talk about our transactions. So let me go ahead and save and confirm our changes. There we go. And you've probably noticed that I was scrolling up and down here. If you're at the church and you're working with this and you have to do a lot of scrolling, you may want to zoom in or zoom out depending on your preference. And when you're working with Windows, you can do Control plus or Control minus to either zoom in or zoom out. And sometimes if you go from 100% to 90% or 80%, you can actually see more accounts and not have to scroll up and down. Or if you're having a hard time seeing it, you can Control plus and you can zoom in, and it's a little easier to see at that point in time. So that's a little keyboard shortcut for Google Chrome if you're using Windows. And Macintosh, Apple, they have their own keyboard shortcuts as well. And you can increase or decrease the view as well. Okay, so let's go back to our PowerPoint and let's take a look at liabilities. So liabilities are going to be amounts that we owe. They're not necessarily debts, even though I'm going to call them debts here. Sometimes it's going to be money that you owe that isn't a debt. It's not something that you went out and purchased on credit and then you have to pay back. Sometimes it's just money that you're holding to pay out later on down the line. So there's 2 types of liabilities. There's short-term debt and long-term debt. So short-term debt isn't, in my mind, really isn't debt so much. It's just you're holding that money. Payroll taxes, healthcare savings accounts. So if you're using a healthcare savings account, you're holding that money to pay out later on down the line at the end of the quarter or whatever, that money is stored in liabilities. And it could also be offerings for other congregations. So you took up a collection to help out another church in another area, and you have that money, that's part of your liabilities. So then from there, there's long-term debt, there's mortgages, there's loans, and there's car loans. So long-term debts are going to be things that stretch out over several years. And basically, you'll use the liabilities to track money that is owed to somebody. So, it could be as simple as payroll taxes, or it could be mortgages. So, and then basically, you'll compare your assets versus your liabilities to get a picture of the health of the congregation, the financial health of the congregation. So, if you have more liabilities than assets, you're kind of underwater there, then there's something to think about, something to consider. The financial health isn't so good. If you have a bunch of assets and no liabilities, you're in pretty good shape at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to Church360 Ledger. And with Church360 Ledger, we'll go to liabilities. These are the liabilities that would have imported from Shepherd staff. We're going to create a new category. So one example that I show lots of times is entering in a loan. So let's say that we purchased a conversion van, and we're going to call this loans, L-O-A-N-S, and then click submit. And then that's going to create our category. So you'll click new category, you'll type in the name, and you'll submit it. Then you can add an account. And let's say that we purchased it from Ford and we got a loan through Ford Credit. And if you're using account numbers, you could type in your account numbers. Let's say that I'm not using account numbers. And then I can say initial balance and say the loan, I don't know how much a van is, but we're going to say that, say it's $30,000 for a van. And then we'll click submit. And then that would create that account. So this is how much we owe on the loan, $30,000. And then we'll just drag it and position it underneath loans. And then that will show me the total that we owe in loans. And basically the categories are going to group these accounts together. Okay, confirm. Then from there, let's take a look at our next account type, which is going to be our income accounts. So income accounts record revenue received during the current fiscal or finance year. So they're going to track from January 1st all the way through December 31st, and they're going to continue to increase as we receive money all the way up until we run our fiscal year, run our year end, and we zero that out by running the year end. Then it starts back at zero at the start of 2019 and continues to grow. So they record revenue received during the current fiscal year. These accounts are budgeted accounts. So you can go in and assign a budget to these accounts. Examples of income accounts are going to be offerings. So like your general fund, your building fund, scholarship fund, those are examples of income accounts. It also can include interest earned on bank accounts. So if you have an interest earning account, that's income. It could also be rental property. So, and I guess you could also say, like, if you just simply rent space to an organization that meets, once a week or once a month, then that would be, rental income as well. And these accounts do zero out at the end of the year. So if it's something that you want to keep track of for multiple years, then you should use a restricted fund to keep track of that money. Okay, so let's switch back to Church360 Ledger, and we're going to go to income accounts, and our lists are getting a little bit longer here. And with our income accounts, and taking a look at this, we have our offerings, we have our funds, there's general, mission, youth, building. We also have education. And when you're looking at your income accounts, these should track every reason why people contribute to the church. So it should be inclusive. And, it's broken into offerings, there's other income, and there's also some miscellaneous options down here as well. So And looking at this, I'm going to add a category. And since we're tracking restricted funds, I'm going to add a category called restricted income. Restricted income. Then press enter to save that. And I'm just going to put that right above other income. And any account that is going to have restricted money in it, I'm going to put that under restricted income. So that when I'm looking at my totals, I'm just looking at money that's being either unrestricted or restricted. So I'm going to leave the general fund there, but let's say that this is supposed to be for missions. We'll say youth. And I'm going to add one for our scholarship fund. Oh, let me close that. That is actually supposed to be an account. So I'm going to click new account, and then I'm going to call that scholarship fund. Okay. And then I could enter in an account number, and we're going to say that since we're starting out, this has a 0 initial balance, and then click submit. And then I'm going to drag this and reposition it in the correct area there. So this is restricted. We could add in another category here at the top, and we could call these unrestricted. So we could say unrestricted income. Then submit. Then I'm going to drag this one all the way to the top here. Then I'm going to drag, and you'll notice how it selects that whole section. So all the ones that are unrestricted, I'm going to put under unrestricted, and this is the total of unrestricted income. And then I'm going to have restricted. So actually, I'm going to move other up here and drag that under unrestricted as well. So unrestricted here at the top, restricted down at the bottom. And then this is the total amount for unrestricted. And then this is the total amount for restricted, which is 0 right now, but we're going to do some deposits in our next training to total those together. So I'm going to save those changes and confirm those changes. And that's how you can enter in your income accounts. Then from here, next is going to be expenses. So with expenses, this is going to track, record how monies are spent, how money is going to be spent. So in looking at this, when we write a check for salaries, when we purchase something, this is the type of account that's going to offset our checks and our payments. These accounts are budgeted accounts. So you can create a budget for your income accounts. You can also create a budget for your expense accounts, and you can keep track of that money throughout the whole year. So these are budgeted accounts. And really, when you think about your budgets, in most cases, you're really thinking about the expenses more than anything else, even though it is important to budget your income accounts as well, so that you can kind of have an understanding how you're doing with money coming into the church. And that could be a sign that, hey, maybe we should adjust our expenses because we're not bringing in as much as we thought we were. Or it might be saying we can, purchase something that we've been, holding off on purchasing because we are bringing in more. So budgets help out with that quite a bit. Okay, so budgeted accounts. Examples of expense accounts are salaries, materials for church programs, of course, office supplies. It could be postage for those people who are still doing a lot of mailings, and could be utilities. So there's always utility bills. And these accounts also zero out at the end of the year. So just like income accounts, they'll continue to grow all year long. Once you run your year end, basically by locking the finance or fiscal year, then they'll zero out and start over again at 0, growing the whole year long. So we're going to go ahead and go back into Church360 Ledger here, and we're going to scroll down and go to expenses. And expenses, they do track how you spend the church's money. And inside of here, we've imported all of these accounts. The one that I want to add that is not in here is bank fees, because we're going to do some journal entries and show bank fees tomorrow. So I'm going to say new account. And I'm going to add in bank fees. Bank fees, there we go. We're going to say that this has a 0 balance as well. So then I can click submit, and I can drag that into the appropriate area that I want to at that point. So maintenance, grounds, transfers. So I'm going to put it underneath this miscellaneous up here. So, and it's B, so I'm going to put it at the top of this miscellaneous up here. So we have church expenses and we have miscellaneous, but we also just have a complete miscellaneous area down here. And then it's maintenance, church grounds, and transfers. So then once I make those changes, I'll make sure to save and confirm our changes. Then our chart of accounts is now done. Now, once the chart of accounts is completed, the next thing to take a look at is budgets. So I'm going to scroll up to the top of our window here, and I'm going to go to the gear here at the top, and I'm going to go down to budgets. And budgets is basically a plan for the amount of money that we're going to bring in or the amount of money that we're going to spend for the upcoming year. And basically, we have budgeted our income accounts and expense accounts. Now, since we did an import from Shepherd Staff, it pulled in all of our budgets for 2018, but we can create a budget for 2019 if we'd like. It's a little early. This is April, but you do have the option to create budgets for the upcoming year. And when you're entering a budget into the system, if you have prior years, you can state that you want to use last year's budgets for all of your accounts, or you can state that you want to use last year's actuals for all of your accounts. And that can be done for the whole income and expense grouping, but it can also be done, like if I click on general here, I can do that for a single account as well. So I could say I want the budget or I want the actuals, either one. And when you're dealing with income, if you use last year's actuals, then it instantly lets you know whenever you're looking at your budget whether or not you're doing better than last year or worse than last year. So some people will, come up with their own budgets. Some people will use the actuals from last year. Some people will use the exact same budget from last year. So strictly up to you. Now, when working with the budgets, and I'm just going to say that I'm going to use last year's actuals for my budgets. When working with the budgets, when you go into here, if you type in a dollar amount in the total column, then that dollar amount will be divided up over 12 months. Will be divided up over 12 months. So like right now we have 46570. So if I put in 50,000, it'll just take that amount and divide it up by 12 months, putting $4,166 in each one. And actually, let's go back and take a look at 2018, since that's going to have all the budgets for the whole year. So we'll give that just a second to load. And inside of here, like the budget for the general fund was 270,000, and basically we just entered it in and divided it by 12. Now, depending on your church, and I guess really your treasurer, they may decide that they want to use different amounts for each month, because some months are definitely going to be higher than other months. So like, when there's Easter, there's going to be higher amounts in that month. And from my understanding, when it comes to December, a large percentage of the money that comes into a church comes in during the month of December. So that number could be higher as well. And you can change each one of the monthly amounts. So even though you started out dividing, like say this was 270,000, even though you started out dividing a total amount by 12 months, you can go in here, and it was April 1st this year. So you could type in a dollar amount, and then that would adjust that month, but it would also adjust the total amount for the year as well. So you have two choices. It could be totals, but it also could be monthly amounts as well. And you can manually type those in however you prefer. So At the top is going to be income. At the bottom is going to be your expenses. You'll just basically type in the numbers that you want, kind of like a rinse and repeat option. When you're done, you would say save changes, and it will save those changes. If you make a bunch of changes and you're not happy with it, you can click reset, and then that'll take you back to your prior save. And it looks like there's no visual response, but if we go back up here, we've got our 2,700 again. So, and it's equal monthly amount. So that lets me know that it did reset. Okay, so in looking at this, there is an import option that's rather neat. It's kind of slick. So like if I export my budgets to Excel, once I open up that budget list, budget XLS, X, give that just a second. Once I open up my budgets list, then open this up here, then I can enable editing, and I'll close those. So then I can enable editing, and I can actually make changes inside of here. So if I go in here and I say the general fund is really supposed to be 300,000. 1, 2, 3, there we go. And it'll just change this number here. Now it won't automatically divide all of these items, but you can go in here and you can literally copy once the changes have been made, and you can paste that into this box here. Actually, I think I copied too many cells there. From there down. Let me try one more time. The copy and paste thing does work, I swear. I probably shouldn't swear. So if I go here and I'm going to copy all the months this time. Right click, copy, and then right click and paste. There it goes. It worked that time. No, that's not the right number though. 423, I believe I need to copy from, and I'm going to resize these cells here. Make that just a hair smaller there. So I think I should copy from the general fund down. Right click and copy, and then go into here, right click and paste. Four 42958. Okay, let me try one more time. I think copy the whole sheet. There we go. Right click, copy, right click, paste special, paste as plain text. Give it just a second. 27.7. So if I change, that should be 300,000 there. I will have to look into that and get back to the team, or get back to the audience on that one. But that should be pasting in the 2,700 there, or that should be 300,000 for general fund. Sorry about the confusion there, but that's supposed to work. So I'll look into that. Okay, so you can switch different years. Once you make changes, and those changes are in the system, then you'll just use the save button down at the bottom to save your changes. And you just want to make sure that you save changes and you don't close out without saving those changes. Okay, so then scroll down, save your changes, and confirm your changes. Just save your changes. So, okay, once we have our budgets in the system, the next thing to show is going to be our payees. So if I go to the gear here at the top right and go to payees, then once I'm in payees, it does import all of our vendors from Shepherd Staff, but you can go in and you can create new payees if you'd like. So you can go to the bottom and click add a new one, and then you can type in first name, last name, type in the company name. So say this is Sam Snow Removal. Then you can enter in the street, city, state, zip, and phone, and then click submit. The only field that is required is the company name, but if it's a person, then you are going to want to fill in the first name, last name, fill in the address so that you have all of your information. But this is one of those things that's considered like a best practice, is to create your payees before you actually start creating your transactions, so that all that information is in there. You don't actually have typos and mistakes because you're creating all of those payees on the fly. So we could say that this is Sam Thompson, and they are at 1234 Main Street. St. Charles. Okay. Then if there's a note, you can put a note in here. Credit on account, and then click submit, and then it creates that payee in the system. So that's how you'll create your payees. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and let's go to our end of class quiz. So we're going to go to quiz, and I'm going to go ahead and launch the first quiz question. So our first quiz question is going to be multiple choice. Okay, and everybody should be able to see the poll at this point in time. So multiple choice, what type of account is used to create a bank account? A, asset, B, restricted fund, or C, income? Okay. Perfect. Okay, so I'll go ahead and close the poll and share the results. And we had 93% say asset and 7% say income. So I'm going to hide the results and share the answer. And the answer is A. An asset account is the account type you would use for your bank accounts. These accounts keep track of your bank balances. So, and I think one thing I didn't talk about a lot was, like, when we're setting this up and we're creating our bank accounts, I did mention, hey, you've got to enter in an initial balance. That initial balance is really important if you're starting out from scratch, because every single transaction is going to apply to that bank balance. So when you're setting it up, we just want to make sure that we have the correct initial balance so that we run our reports and go back and review our balances, everything looks the way that it should. Okay, question number 2. Okay, there we go. And this one pertains to accounts as well. If your church takes out a loan, what type of account should you create? A, expense, B, liability, or C, second time's a charm. A, expense, B, income, C, liability. It looks like you guys are on top of this one. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So we were unanimous this time. We said liability. 100% of the people said liability. So I'm going to hide the results and show the answer. Of course, the answer is C, liability. A liability account should be used to keep track of what remains to be paid on your loan. When you enter a transaction, either checks or journal entries, I guess you can say payments as well inside of here, to make a payment on the loan, use a liability account as the offset account for that transaction. This will decrease the amount owed on the loan. When the loan is completely paid off, the liability account should have a balance of 0. Okay, question number 3, and it's going to be multiple choice. Please select 2. So select the 2 types of accounts that can have a budget assigned to them. A, asset, B, liability, C, income, or D, expense. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. And anytime that we do one of the polls that has multiple selections, the percentages are a little squirrely, but we have 183% of the people voted here, but it does, like, you have to select 2 or it kind of throws it off a little bit. But 8% said asset, 83% said income, and 92% said expense. So we were pretty close there. So I'm going to hide the results and show the answer. And the answers are C and D. Income and expense accounts are the 2 account types that can have budgets attached to them. To see how closely these budgets are being adhered to, view the statement of income and expense. Good job, everyone. True or false? Question number 4. Will a restricted fund maintain its balance when the finance year is advanced or the finance year is closed? True or false? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. We had 83% say true and 17% say false. So we are going to hide the results and share the answer. And the answer is true. A restricted fund will carry its balance over into the new fiscal year when the fiscal year is closed. Okay, question number 5. And this one pertains to restricted funds as well. True or false, the balance in a restricted fund is stored in an asset account. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. And we had 75% say true and 25% say false. So I'm going to hide the results and share the answer. And when it comes to Church360 Ledger, the answer is true. Restricted funds are attached to a single asset account, and the balances show on the restricted fund but are stored in the asset account. So, okay, do you have any questions? We'd love to hear from you. And before people start dropping off, it happens really quick at the end of these webinars. I do want to thank everybody for attending today's Church360 Ledger webinar. We truly hope that you enjoyed today's session. If you have any questions outside the question and answer, of course, I'll hang on and you can post your questions. But if you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call at 1-800-346-6120 or shoot us an email at support@cts.cph.org. Okay. Oh, there goes a question. There's a question that came in from Wendy. So the question is, do you create an income and expense account to go along with the restricted asset? And the answer is yes. So with Church360, Ledger, the restricted fund is part of the asset, and you'll need an income and or expense account. I can't really say and or. You will need an income and you will need an expense account. In most cases, you'll name the accounts very similarly. You'll name them almost the same. And basically, like if you have a building fund that's restricted, you'll have a building fund income, and you possibly would have a building fund expense, just depending on how you're tracking the expenditures. And they'll kind of all work together. The restricted fund tracks the balance in that fund. The income, the restricted income tracks how much income was brought in for that purpose. And the restricted expense tracks how much was being spent for that purpose. All during the current year, of course, when you're talking about income and expense accounts. Very good question. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow when we're actually creating our transactions. But you're 100% correct. And thanks for bringing that up. When you create these restricted funds, you'll need a restricted income and a restricted expense account. Thanks, Wendy. Okay. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I really appreciate you joining me today for this training session. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I hope everybody has another question. Hello, Wendy. Do you differentiate between the donor restricted accounts and the accounts restricted for use? I don't know. Do you differentiate? I can't say I've ever heard anybody doing that, but I can definitely envision in my head that there would be some benefits to that. So part of registration fees, the follow-up from Wendy, for example, part of registration fees put aside for assignment books. I haven't heard anybody do that, but I could definitely see the benefit of doing that. Like you could create accounts to track our categories to group those items together. So I can see some benefit in it because it helps clarify what's going on with your finances. So if it was me and I had that situation, I would, because clarity helps out, because you're going to have to explain these reports to your congregation, to the different people in the church, and to be able to clarify it so that it's easy to understand makes all the sense in the world. So I would if I was you in that situation. You're welcome. Thank you so much, Wendy. It's always good to have a few questions. Okay, so people are dropping off pretty quickly here. I'm going to go ahead and if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to sign out and move on to my next task. I hope everybody has a wonderful afternoon. You have a good lunch, and we'll talk to you soon. For Jordan Bogart, this is Rod Kiles. We are signing off.